am a researcher. I got a few laughs. I've been doing research for 10 years in the UX space. I am a professor of UX research. I'm co-founder of the UX Researchers Guild in the US and Canada. It's a community of about 2,000 researchers. My entire life is research. It's my entire personality. I've been told I dress like a researcher. I kind of view research as a lifestyle now. And like some of you have a twinkle in your eye, and I think you're also researchers. So I think I'm in good company here. And when it comes to research, the number one question that I get asked by clients, by other UX professionals, other product professionals, the number one thing people want to ask me is, how can we improve our UX research on my team, on my organization? How can we improve? How can we do better research? That's the number one question I've been getting for 10 years. And so today I want to walk you through a little assessment of your own team's UX research practices and give you some tips, perhaps, after you reflect on that process for how to take your UX research to the next level. So the way I see it, research kind of exists in 4 dimensions. Is that nerdy enough? 4 dimensions, 4 factors. There's culture. So the desire for research. Is research important at your organization? Then there's skill. Can people do rigorous research? Have they been trained to do research? Process is the next one. Is research efficient on your team, at your organization? And then there's impact, which is what kinds of questions does research even help answer? So I want to walk you through today. I want to walk you through these 4 dimensions for your team. And I want you to be thinking about these 5 different levels and where your team is. Is culture or skill or process or impact, is it absent, emerging, developing, maturing, or excellence? Paradise, research paradise. I'm sure some of you feel that way. Dry humor. If this feels a little bit like a survey, it's because it is. After 10 years in research, more than 10 years in research, to be honest, I actually only communicate in surveys and unbiased qualitative interview questions. Honestly, you can ask my family. So today we're going to walk through these 4 factors for your team. You're going to rate, if you have a piece of paper, get it out. We're going to rate your team on each of these depending on this level. And I'm going to walk you through, what does each level look like here? What does absent mean? What does emerging mean? What does developing mean? And the first one we're going to start with is culture. Research culture. A fun one, a real fun one. So when culture is absent, when we have research maturity absent here, maybe this resonates with some of you. I think I know what a good design looks like. Yeah, that's my best CPO impression at a startup. I think I know. I think I know what good design looks like when I see it. Or my favorite in the US is we have, if Henry Ford asked people, what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I honestly think this comes from a place where leaders fear fear that research is going to take away their creativity or going to take away the opportunity to be innovative. I think that's where this comes from. But sometimes research culture, the desire to do research, the idea that research is important is essentially absent. I hope none of you are struggling in this space, but from a couple of smirks, I can see that a few of you may be. Let's have a drink later. After absent, we have emerging, developing. So you ever heard this one? I wish we could talk to customers, but gosh, we just don't have time. We don't have time, but I wish we could. There's some desire there, right? It's not being prioritized. Then as you move through, maybe maturing and excellence, how can we launch without user feedback? You start to get this incredulous, of course we're doing research. We need research. And excellence is finally starting to look like we have a research director, maybe a research VP, someone at the table who knows anything about research. And then eventually, research utopia, right? Understanding the user is the foundation of everything we do. And if you're there, good for you. Good on you. But most of us are going to be somewhere between absent and maturing on this. So mark on your survey that I've made you do collectively, go ahead and mark where your team is in culture. The next one here is skill. You're going to have to kind of be hard on yourself for this. I want to look at skill as a team, not skill as a you, not skill as an individual. So on your team, what does your UX research skill look like across all of you? Absent looks like, I'm going to be real, and if this is you, just hold it in your heart. I showed designs to some people, and they loved it. Show and tell. Research looks like a demo. You demo stuff to people, and then they tell you they like it, right? So that's a lower skill. Or my favorite, like I have conversations with customers all the time. PMs, I'm looking for you. Yeah. I have conversations with customers all the time, these casual conversations. We're best friends. I take them to lunch. Research skill may be on the low side there. As you move across, you start to have things like interview guides. Maybe people can conduct their own usability tests. Starting to get some traction there. And then finally, let's identify the H word. Hypothesis starts coming up in meetings. Yeah, you're probably in developing or maturing if you all really like the hypothesis word. Finally, again, research paradise here. At the skill level looks like we have qualitative and quantitative research, expertise for all of our projects. Who are we? I don't know, but maybe it's you, and maybe you can check that box. That is the skill dimension. Moving on to process. So for your UX research process, this is your efficiency, this is your repeatability, your documentation, ooh, sexy word, and your research operations. So if we're absent, sometimes this can happen. Wait a second, you sent out a survey yesterday? I sent out a survey yesterday to our entire customer base, to our entire user base. So that may be a little bit of absent process if those kinds of things happen. As we move along the spectrum, maybe you start to reference old research. Well, we did an interview project last quarter, last year, so we can do another one, and maybe we should have a look at whatever we did last year. Does anyone remember? No? Oh, well, we did one last year, and maybe we can get better. Then, as you move along, something happens. Someone finally invests in a tool or something. And scheduling, screening, recruiting, all of a sudden starts to become easier. And that's your developing, that's your maturing stage. You start to have things like a research repository. and continuous research. And finally, when we get to excellence, we have, there's a template for that, there's a template for that, there's a template for that. It's in Confluence, it's in whatever, the wiki. So if you have a lot of templates, you have someone, a specialist, that's reviewing practices, reviewing your research process. So lots of people are writing research plans. Someone's taking a look at those plans. Good plan, good plan. Try again, good plan, good plan. That starts to look like an excellent UX research process. Final factor here for you to rate on your little survey that I can see you're all doing is impact. So this is the scope. How much can research affect things at your organization? This one's a little triggering. So just like steel yourself a little bit. Find those problems, find the pain points. Maybe one day we'll change something. Maybe next time, maybe when we revisit the roadmap, maybe next quarter we'll make those changes. If that sounds like you, I'm sorry, impact seems to be absent for you. Moving through that, you start to get into doing some usability tests, but like 3 weeks before launch. You know, as if you can catch things and turn them around really quickly. So that's your emerging stage. You can check that box. As you move through, we have a shared understanding of the user at some point. So journey maps and personas, and people are reading those things, and we're starting to get some traction when it comes to impact. We're starting to impact the internal culture. Then, mature. The roadmap finally starts to be based on research findings. We've affected the roadmap. And finally, the gold standard, right? Research informs every little thing we do, whether it's the fonts we're selecting or product strategy. Research is a part of the process. So mark where your team is, cry a little cry, and we'll move along. So wherever you are, I'd like to tell you, I'm going to spoil the end of my talk, which is there's actually no perfect UX research practice. There's no one formula that we're all striving to this perfect little utopia of UX research. Instead, there's what's right for your context. So it's important to know where you stand here, but in a new column, in a bright orange column, on this crappy slide template that I found, because I'm a researcher. In the bright orange boxes, I actually want you to rate how painful each of these are. Because you might find that your culture is developing. It's not that bad, but it's the most painful factor. People aren't treating research like it's important. People don't seem to desire to do research. So it's very painful. So I'd like you to rank these 1 through 4 on how painful are they for your team. Because you shouldn't necessarily strive for excellence in every single one of these today, right now. You have other things to do with your time, I'm sure. So you need to prioritize which is the most painful for your team. What's really holding you back of these 4 factors? And depending on what that one of those 4 factors is that you are selecting, I have some tips for you for how to take it to the next level. Is it time to change? There are a few indicators at each one of these factors that reliably produce the need to level up your research practices. For culture, this is not going to be too surprising for anyone who's ever gone through like a leadership transition. All of a sudden, research culture has changed, or it needs to be leveled up in some way because you have this opportunity, new leadership. Maybe it was a merger or an acquisition, right? And you suddenly have this opportunity to level up your research culture. The desire to do research increases. So what can you actually do? Research culture is the hardest one to change. If you are out there trying to change, I see you. Like, this is the hardest factor to change. What can you do to change a research culture? To convince that founder who got lucky with a couple of guesses and made a few $1 million that they might actually benefit from some research at some point? Huh? Anyone? Okay, just me. Got it. Yeah, trauma. So if that is you, my recommendation to you, and it's very grounded, it's very real, like it's going to be a hard journey for you. But my recommendation is to first set an example. Start doing your research when you can do research. Inform your decisions and be really transparent about the fact that you're doing research. Set that example. So you've got a little bit of momentum going. Then embrace the explicit guess. What do I mean by explicit guess? Embrace the fact that in business, in organizations, we often have to guess, or we often choose to guess. And sometimes guesses lead to success. Totally fine. But what you can do is start to label those guesses. Start using the word guess all the time. When you don't have data, call it a guess. Yeah, you're right, Bob. I'm willing to take that bet on that guess. Guess. There is a power that comes from labels, let me tell you. And if you start throwing the word guess around like that, in a friendly way, it's a friendly guess. We're guessing together, Bob. If you can start doing that, that creates a pathway where Bob starts to go guessing, guessing, guessing. And then one day Bob's in the shower and it's like, I don't know if I want to guess on this one. Boom. Okay, so that's my recommendation to you. Culture's hard to change. Embrace the guess, but make it explicit. Label it as a guess wherever you can. Trust me, this is the path to success. Okay. Skill. Perhaps the easiest one to change, honestly. You're all doing it right now. You're at a conference. You're doing some professional development. That's one way to level up your team's skill. Some signals, if this is a hard truth for you to swallow, that maybe your team isn't as skilled at research practices as maybe you think, some signals that might be the case for you. I feel like I'm giving you the hard talk. Some signals that might be the case for you are low utilization of findings. You did research, but no one's using it. No one's using it. Often that's a skill problem. Now, you'll have to do some critical thinking. I'm not going to, judge you from here. We don't know each other. But often, low utilization is because you don't have the rigor in your research to produce confidence in other people. And especially when you see that whoever did the research is really confident, but then whoever is trying to just take the findings and make decisions based off of it, but they weren't doing the research, if their confidence is low, that's a skill problem. Because it means you don't have, someone in their head is saying, can we really bank on our 10-person sample size? Do we really want to do that? That's in the back of their mind, but they're just not telling you. So skill here can be very helpful. Finally, a good indicator that maybe skill levels are all over the place is if findings change depending on who does them, right? So Terry talked to a bunch of customers and is like, they love feature A, we're gonna build feature A. But I talked to a couple of customers and they want feature B. They didn't even mention feature A. If that's happening, it's probably a research skill problem. And you can probably solve that problem by professional development, like what you're doing now. Get your team to level up their research practices. Do some peer training. All of you are good at some piece of research, probably. Maybe it's qualitative interviews. Maybe it's usability testing. Decide who's good at what on the team and train each other on it. Say, you're the usability testing master, so you're going to train everybody on usability testing. And I'm the qualitative interview master, so I'm going to train everybody. The other thing is cringy, but record yourselves. Seriously, record yourselves doing everything and watch it. Really watch it. Watch yourself interviewing someone, conducting that usability test. There is nothing like watching yourself in a recording that levels up your skill faster, honestly. So if you're not really holding yourself accountable to doing that, if you ever need a pep talk, come to me. You can do it. Watch the recording. Finally, if your team has some cash, hire an expert. Hire them fractionally. Hire an expert consultant for 10 hours a week to train your team, to teach your team how to level up their practices. It's a great way to spend your training budget to make sure that your team can level up. Okay, culture skills, so now process. Maybe this is your problem. Maybe this is your pain. Process. How many of you are like this? No one has time for research, but we all agree it's important. We just don't have time. That problem, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, nods, I'm sorry. So if no one has time for research, research is taking too much time. And that kind of signals to me a process problem. Past research is not retained. The classic, like, we did a study like that 2 years ago. Yeah. I didn't do it. The person before me did it, but I know we did it. Oh, what did we find? I don't know. Okay, where's the document? I'll have to dig that up for you. Yes, and it's somewhere in some like digital vault and you don't know how to find it. So if past research isn't coming through, then that's often a process problem. What about this? Redundant projects. So I mentioned the survey thing, but maybe you find out that your team is testing something and then that team over there is also testing that something. Whoops. And you don't find out until someone brings it to the meeting. Guess what we found? Oh, we're doing that project too. Or you like secretly cross it off your research roadmap because you were going to do it next week. If there's redundant research happening, that tends to be a process problem. And then finally, we have so many research requests. Wow, we have an awesome research culture. Everybody wants to do it. So many research requests, but we don't have enough bandwidth to do all those requests. You need to start looking at your process. How efficient can you get? And some of the tips that I'd like to give you, tactics for improving your process, make templates as you go. If you're not a template machine, become one. It's the best. Ask my mom. Hey, Mom, here's my template for how are you today? Here's my template birthday email. Yikes. Mom, don't watch this. Make templates as you go. Assume your work's going to be referenced. Assign owners to different parts of the process. If you can't have one person owning the process, assign someone. You're the scheduling person, and you're the recruiting person, and you're the whatever you're good at person. And assign different owners to that different parts of the process. Then you come to the owner for that part of the process. And along those lines, just form a research operations committee. If you're not big enough to have a dedicated reops person or a dedicated reops team, form a committee. So meet regularly and try to level up your practices as a group so that no one's reinventing the process every single time you do a new project. So some tips on process. Finally, impact. A tricky one to change because it just takes time. So impact is that scope of questions that research can actually affect. So if you feel like maybe you're releasing stuff and you feel really good about what you're releasing, but you kind of release it into a void, and if someone came back and was like, was that successful? You'd be like, yeah, I think so. That's a good signal that impact needs to level up. Another one is just, we have to build a new product. We have to enter a new market. We're building a new app. There's a new initiative, right? So if something like that is happening, research may need to climb to the next level into a more strategic place, perhaps. Maybe it's been tactical thus far. Maybe it's been too strategic thus far, and now we really need to ramp up our usability testing capabilities. We need to make sure that we're researching the small stuff. If that kind of sounds like you, any of those, Some of the tactics that I've identified are to centralize practices, but specialize people. Embed researchers on teams. If you don't have enough researchers to do that, create subject matter experts for each product. So I'm going to work on products A, B, and C. Those are my domain. My counterpart's going to work on D, E, F. That's their domain. Specialize a little bit. Specialize in that domain knowledge, but centralize your practices. That means research as a unit owns the operations and how we do things. I'm seeing some nods, and I feel good about it. So centralized practices, specialized people. The last thing here is research representation. So in strategic discussions, if there isn't a researcher in the meeting, you're probably never going to impact strategy. And sometimes this is a hard conversation to have, but if impact is where your team is sticking, it's probably because you're not in the right meetings. Your researchers are not in the right meetings. And folks need to get in those meetings so that they can supply the data that will help make those decisions. So tricky sometimes because we're talking about restructuring teams and asking to be in big meetings. Yikes. Godspeed. Okay, so pulling this all together. When it comes to leveling up your research practices, assess, do this little survey with your team, see where everyone feels the gaps are. Identify what that gap is that is the most painful. One thing, one factor. Don't try to do everything in the whole world. Don't try to be perfect. One factor. Then plan. Plan how you're going to attack that one factor. Create a plan. Put a calendar invite 6 months from now to check in on how the plan's going. Prepare to reflect on your success. Plan with the team and start moving forward on that one factor. And make sure you define success and you actually reflect at the end to make sure you're making progress. But start with one thing. Research change happens one focused step at a time. So good luck to you. Thanks.